Hi everyone, tonight it's just me and Claire because Marion and Denise are off on their holidays. So it's going to be slightly different tonight. We're just going to have a bit of an informal chat and inform you guys of what our week's been like. So this week I've been looking at kids' cartoons that normalise queer, trans and non-binary. So I've got a list of them here. The first one I want to draw your attention to is Steven Universe. Now that's on Netflix. This is described as the queerest kid show on TV. It's centered around the adventures of Stephen and his adopted family, who are female warrior gems, and they're called the Crystal Gems, and most of the gems are queer. So that's great. And then we've got Danger and Eggs. This one is described as doing a wonderful job of showing transgender characters. There's a trans girl, voiced by Jazz Jennings, a non-binary character who plays in the band, and it just normalizes trans and non-binary for children. Then we've got Too Loud. This is the last one I'm going to tell you about. This centers on the lives of siblings. One of them came out as a trans girl called, I'm not sure if it's Desiree or Desire. And Desire comes out at a slumber party. She sneaks into the slumber party with, he sneaks into the slumber party with his sister, and he's dressed up as a girl. And he comes out at the slumber party, and everyone's like, oh, it's fine. We like you just as much as Desiree as we did as Jeffrey. So the plot is written in a way that it makes coming out as trans seem positive and rewarding, and obviously shows that it's all right for young boys to dress up as girls and sneak into slumber parties. But it plays with stereotypes about dressing in a certain way. And then there's another episode on it about a Rachel. Rachel's father is not accepting of Rachel coming out, but pressure is put on Rachel's father to accept that he has a new daughter. So at that point, he has to see sense and accept that he has now got a Rachel and not whatever he was called as a boy. So I don't know, Claire, what are you going to speak about?
Gosh, well, talking about not accepting children for who they are, I'm going to talk a little bit tonight again about Jazz Jennings. Now, Dr. Marcy Bowers was interviewed by Abigail Shrier, and that article came out, I think it was yesterday. And I personally think this is kind of huge because Marcy Bowers is the incoming WPATH president. And this article is really interesting because Bowers' thoughts that have been recorded in this interview are at odds with current WPATH guidelines. And I believe on Reddit in the past day or so, it's been going absolutely crazy with people cancelling operations with this surgeon now, saying, well, you can just imagine the backlash from the TRAs. But basically, that he and another psychologist, Anderson, I believe the name is, basically say that puberty blockers in kids in the early stages of puberty, they're not a fan of that, as the words they used, and the psychological effects of puberty blockers, not sure if they are reversible. This is what they're now saying. Now that's at odds with what is currently in WPATH. So I had a quick look at the WPATH because I thought I'd have a look and see what the guidelines actually say, redefined at the moment or reviewed. But there's SOC 8, it's called Standards of Care. You can't see any of that at the moment. It's all just headings and there's no content. It's due in December. Assessment, support and therapy approaches for adolescents with gender dysphoria, non-binary individuals. Separately, there's sexual health, competency, training and education, and ethics. And this is an organisation that the likes of Stonewall, etc., defer to for all of their guidelines around transgender health, if we can call it that. So I thought that was quite interesting. And one of the contributors for therapy approaches for children is the delightful Susie Green of Mermaids. I think that lets us all know the standards of care that will be around there. So Lisa, I hear you've been reading some children's books this week.
I wouldn't call them children's books, but they are aimed at children. So the hips on the drag queen go swish, swish, swish. So basically, they have written a book about drag queens, and I guess it's to the tone of The Wheels on the Bus, but it's just saying, obviously, the drag queen's hair goes up and, you know, the hips go swish, swish, swish. I can't remember the rest in it, but I just thought it's so inappropriate telling children about drag queens. Almost as inappropriate as Mary Black taking Flojob, the drag queen, in to see primary one pupils in Paisley a couple of years ago. I feel like that's worth a mention. That certainly disturbed me, and I'm glad my kids weren't at school, or at school in Paisley anyway. And quickly, I just wanted to also say, while I'm on this kind of subject, I was watching a bit of YouTube today, obviously reading children's books on YouTube, and I came across Queer Kid Stuff. This is a channel on YouTube. It's got 24.6 thousand subscribers. You know, they're saying things like, oh, it doesn't matter if you're a boy, girl, or something in between. And then what I did notice was the girl who hosts it actually turned around. She was like, oh, I love Steven Universe. Do we have other Steven Universe fans here? Which obviously I've spoke about Steven Universe. This is actually a grown-up woman on this channel as well, and she has various trans people on the channel normalizing like your gender privilege and things like that. And I don't know, I just thought it was really, really weird. She also spoke about what it means to be a good ally, what it means to be cisgender. And by looking at these videos, these are obviously aimed at children aged from like 3-year-old plus. If you were to watch it yourself, you'd understand what I mean. Like there's a little talking teddy bear and there's little wooden colourful blocks and things like that little kids play with. So for me, that's aimed at really young children. So I don't know, what else have you got to speak about, Claire? Maybe politicians?
Well, I mean, yeah, I wrote, yeah, there's been a few people, haven't there? So we've got basically Lammy the Liar. We've got Dominic Raab, who needs a dictionary to explain certain words to him. We've got Boris Johnson, who blusters about biology being important, but dignity, respect. And I'm just wondering, where is the respect for women here? We've got Starmer, who thinks cervixes are problematic. And unbelievably, the only person, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually completely agree with Dominic Cummings, who basically says that Stonewall should be out of all of our organisations. They're a dreadful organisation, and I have to completely agree with Dominic Cummings on that one only. Politicians seem to be in a bit of a mess at the moment. I'm really not sure what the motivation is at the moment, because to me that it does seem like a tide is turning. And going back to Marcy Bowers giving this interview, I watched the Jazz Jennings stuff. You know, it led up to the operation, and then they did the operation, and then post-operation. And I do remember thinking, when the operation was being carried out, the surgeons were arguing, and I thought, God, that's so unprofessional, you know. I thought that at the time. And then after another episode, the parents alluded to the fact they were not happy. Now, I honestly wonder if this interview has been given to try some damage limitation here, because to me, it just smacks of someone trying to deflect in some way. I mean, it kind of read that they were trying to blame maybe the psychologists for like, you know, they're talking about affirmative care maybe not being the right thing. So are they trying to pass the buck in a way? I'm not sure it's going to work. Because what they did to Jazz Jennings, to my mind, is so wrong. I mean, Bowers performed this surgery on Jazz Jennings knowing that he'd never orgasmed, had serious mental health issues and a tiny penis. But now says early puberty blockers inadvisable and says results not as functional. I was going to talk a little bit more tonight about the surgeries, like transgender health and what that means. But what I've decided to do is I'm probably going to create a few sort of video guides to the common things. So maybe we can, I can actually talk about a vaginoplasty versus vulvoplasty, and stuff like that, because we've had quite a lot of requests for more information on that, and people seem to, although it is horrifying, I think it is good to know exactly, what's happening. And so I think that would be quite good. And I'd like to also do one that maybe gives more information to parents about what's being taught in school. Maybe we can go over exactly what queer theory is, and also the stages. I mean, Lisa, you've also done quite a bit of work on that now too. So exactly, what's being taught to children. And I think if parents were aware, they just would not be happy at all.
No.
And then finally, I read a really good article. Now, it was by Lara Adams Miller. Now, I spoke to a really wonderful woman over in Ireland, Jennifer, or Jenny, hi there. She actually lived with an autogynephile, and she spoke to Graham Linehan. And I was really affected by that interview at the time, and I've actually always wanted to talk to her. So we actually had a really lovely conversation a month or two ago, and she told me a little bit about what she experienced at the hands of this autogynephile. And I think initially when they first met, they were a bit like non-conforming, adventurous, a bit fluid in their sexuality and stuff like that, and that was all fine. But as time progressed, I became aware that he was an autogynephile. And I think they moved from America to Ireland, and he got a PC and became basically addicted to porn. Now, when Jenny explained all of this to me about his behaviour, I mean, he used to basically wait outside the children's bedroom for her to finish reading nighttime story and stuff. And this poor woman had been looking after children all day, was probably exhausted. Then she was expected to come out of that bedroom, and she was basically used as like a prop for his sexual fantasies based on the porn that he'd watched. He didn't care about any distress that he might cause her. He didn't really see her as a human being. And it was more, she was a thing that provided validation for him. Now, I wrote it all down. I was trying to sort of, get that clear in my head. And she also said that if she didn't do it right, or she wasn't compliant or whatever, he would be really angry, or he'd isolate her, not talk to her for days, and she'd have to like give in and do what he wanted, because she was very isolated as well where she lived. So she, it was really a very horrible and difficult situation. And I think it came to a head once when she also had to watch like this really awful violent porn. And one day she watched a video with them, and she said it was a woman getting dragged through the snow, and she was she thought she was unconscious. And she actually passed remark to her husband and said, "God, is that woman alive?" And he basically said, "I don't care." And she just sort of realised then, this has got to end. Well, she said all of that, and I couldn't really get my head around it completely, But then I read this article. We can put a link to it actually on here. But basically, it says that autogynephilia functions more like an addiction than an orientation or an identity. And do you remember that guy in America, Call Me Ma'am? And he went absolutely ballistic at that poor boy in the shop.
You're going to give me money back.
Excuse me, sir. There's a young man in here.
Excuse me, it's ma'am. It is ma'am.
I can call the police if you'd like me to. You need to settle down.
You need to settle down and mind your business, okay? Ma'am, once again, ma'am.
I said both of you.
No, you said sir. Once again, it's ma'am.
I actually said both of you guys. It was a general.
Right beforehand, you said sir.
Sir? Okay.
Take it outside. If you want to call me sir again, I will show you, sir.
I apologize. I apologize now.
Because he'd misgendered. Well, I remember thinking, oh my God, you know, you'd think like he'd stabbed him or something. I mean, it was really crazy. Well, this woman says it seems like they're putting it on a bit when they talk about being denied their trans identity, and it will literally kill them. I mean, we hear this all the time, but it makes sense if you think about it. And she says, if you've ever experienced addiction, you will know that feeling. Because it's like, and this was amazing, this bit, she said, if you challenge a person's trans identity whilst they're out there dressed as a woman, etc., she says, it's like you've just given a shot of Narcan to a person high on opioids, and you've interrupted the disassociation they've got with their own bodies. They're dysphoric in a sense because they're not happy being male. And you've actually brought them right down from a high. And this is why they get so angry. And I think when I thought about it in that way, it really makes a lot of sense, you know. And she also said, like, autogynephiles have got a high incidence of substance use and disassociative hobbies, like role-playing stuff and video games, cosplay, that sort of stuff, that, you know, that's all in it as well. One thing for me is the thing about the AGPs, because they seem to be the most vocal, they seem to be the group, because trans is a big umbrella, you know, there's a big difference between autogynephiles, say, to young girls that are dysphoric in their teenage years, and then a 3-year-old whose parents say, you know, that they're got a girl brain or whatever. That totally different to autogynephiles or even transgender people, you know.
Autogynephiles are sexually aroused at the thought of themselves as women. They remain fully intact with a penis. Men who identify as transgender mostly retain their penis, but some do have surgeries. But the huge increase is in women identifying as trans. They tend to have surgeries to remove breasts and to create a phallus.
But and the idea of a man dressing as a woman and then claiming to be a lesbian, you know, I've always wondered about that. But what she says in her article is they want lesbian attention because only women get that. So that makes them real women. So accessing anything that's like exclusively for women is like the ultimate validation. And I just thought that explained it quite well. I mean, I will link it. There's a lot more in this article than that.
I guess the addiction thing makes a lot of sense, because obviously you're saying when they're like doing things that are exclusively for women, like you see a lot of pictures of these men in women's changing rooms with their penis out, and they're getting off on being in women's changing rooms. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And it's even down to things like going for a smear. You know, you've got some of these men, they want to go for a smear test, they want to get into menopause groups and all sorts of stuff like that. And it is literally, basically the experience of the AGP has to be identical to what a woman would do or what a woman would access. And anything less than that, they're not getting that fix that they need. They're not, you know, it's not giving them what they need. So that's why like a third space or anything, that just wouldn't do it, because that's not what that's not the authentic experience women would have.
But the authentic woman doesn't want to go for a smear test.
But then they wouldn't know because they're not women. They don't understand what it is to actually have a period or have a condition like endometriosis and how debilitating it is. You know, being women's not just about choosing a nice dress and twirling about and stuff like that. But the one thing at the end, you cannot satisfy an addict. And I think, you know, I think we really, as women, we must stand up. We've really got to stand up to this and say no. You know, this is a mental health condition, and we're normalizing it and basically changing all of our laws, all of the wording in school, everywhere, to accommodate a mental health problem. In fact, a mental health epidemic.
I agree. I've also learned a new word this week, autopedophilia. So it's a little bit like autogenophilia. And basically, there was a study done, there was 233 participants, so it wasn't a huge study, but 49.1% of the participants, all the participants were paedophiles, I should have mentioned that. So 49%, nearly 50% of all the paedophiles said that when they identified as children, when they thought of themselves as children, they got turned on, they were sexually aroused. So I'll link the study, but it does seem very common that paedophiles are aroused by the thought of themselves dressed up as children. So my concerns are, obviously, you see all these pride marches and you see a lot of these sort of trans or non-binary, they're dressed up as giant babies. So my thoughts now, and obviously a couple of studies have backed this up, one in particular, are that these people are just paedophiles. Just try to normalize paedophilia. They want to rape your children. That's what these people are. And that absolutely sickens me when I see these things, and they're all posting pictures of themselves dressed up as slut babies on social media and things like that. That's so disturbing. And that's kind of all I've got to say tonight. What about you, Claire?
I mean, that all comes really under the queer umbrella, doesn't it? And that's like basically says that heterosexuals and, you know, being lesbian or gay or bisexual, that's not really that cool anymore. You know, you could be any, you know, it could be anything, even sex with animals, etc. It's all there. And the way they get around it is by saying that they're not acting on these impulses, they're just talking about it. And you should, you know, to be your authentic self, you should be free to express yourself. To me, that's just softening children up for what's to come. And that's why this stuff's in school. You know, I've thought a lot about school stuff. I watched Posey Parker the other night, and she was talking as well, you know, just about, like, I was a stay-at-home mum, you know, and there's a lot of shaming around that. Whereas, you know, I personally think, you know, I had children to be there for them, and I didn't really want to pay someone else to look after the children, and sending them now to nursery earlier and earlier. And where's queer theory heading? That's heading into the nursery. Normal to feel so dysphoric in your body that you want to, you know, take hormones that are going to damage you, you know, or do things to your body that's going to alter it forever, sterilize you, and make you very, very ill. You know, you're highly likely to have blood clots, heart problems. You know, the changes in your throat when you take testosterone happens in the heart. And this is why, you know, we have this issue. Giving estrogen to men, highly likely to have a stroke. And, you know, estrogen, women aren't always given the pill because it's known, this is a known problem. And yet we're giving it to the wrong sex and wondering why, you know, we don't know the full effects yet, but they're coming. The lawsuits are coming. I mean, Marcy Bowers knows the lawsuits are coming, and they will be coming in the UK as well. But if there's only 392 GRCs issued since 2004, why are all these changes taking place? And why are we creating a market from our children by introducing them to all of this? You know, TRAs are either arguing for rights that they already have, or they're demanding privileges that nobody else has. We need to wake up. Women need to wake up, or, you know, we're going to end up, the only jobs we'll have in the future are as surrogates or sex workers or menial jobs that, you know, the men's don't want.
I'm no mathematician, but I think 300 and odd compared to the population in Scotland, that's got to be less than 0.01% of the population. So you're right. Why are we changing all these laws and making all these changes for like a tiny, tiny amount? A tiny amount that are probably going to change their mind in about 5 years.
Oh, children, of course. I mean, it's obscene to think children are capable. They're not capable to decide to remove body parts or take drugs that are going to sterilise them or cause them huge harm.
Anyway, that's all from us this week. Watch out for some of Claire's videos coming up where she's going to tell us a couple of different things, and watch out, I've got some potentially bonus little episodes coming up this week as well with Marion and Cauldron, and I think Denise will be back either next week or the week after. So I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye.
Bye.